8 years of solitude had taught Jedediah McGraw to read the weather like a man reads threats, and the storm building on the eastern horizon brought both. His hand moved instinctively to the hidden revolver beneath his work shirt. The New Mexico Territory of 1878 forgave neither weakness nor mistakes. Jed's ranch stood as testament to both his need for isolation and his refusal to die by it. Each morning began with the same ritual, coffee brewing while he checked sightlines and weapons, remnants of a life he'd supposedly left behind. Thunder rumbled as he spotted dust rising beyond the ridge, riders approaching, too many for casual travelers, too direct for lost ones. The federal marshal's badge concealed beneath the floorboards seemed to burn through the wood, a reminder of oaths he'd never truly abandoned despite his failures. Jed positioned himself with tactical precision as 7 figures emerged through the dust. Women, by their silhouettes, all in mourning black. His eyes narrowed. No widows rode like that, moved like that, watched like that. A reclusive lawman hiding from his past. 7 dangerous women with a secret mission, and a storm that will force them all to reveal their true identities. What would you do if your carefully constructed isolation was suddenly shattered? Would you risk trusting strangers when your instincts scream danger? Comment below with what choice you'd make in Jed's position. Like if you're ready to see how this unlikely alliance confronts a powerful enemy hiding behind a respectable facade. Subscribe for more tales of justice, redemption, and unexpected alliances in the untamed West. 8 years of solitude had taught Jedediah McGraw to read the weather like a man reads threats, and the storm building on the eastern horizon brought both. His hand moved instinctively to the hidden revolver beneath his work shirt. The New Mexico Territory of 1878 forgave neither weakness nor mistakes. Jed's ranch stood as testament to both his need for isolation and his refusal to die by it. Each morning began with the same ritual, coffee brewing while he checked sightlines and weapons, remnants of a life he'd supposedly left behind. His gaze swept the perimeter with practiced efficiency, noting the fence post that needed mending and the hawk circling overhead. 8 years since Phillips and that family died under his protection. 8 years of building fences instead of cases, of watching horizons instead of suspects. The guilt had worn a groove in his mind deeper than the rutted trail leading to his property. The coffee pot bubbled on the iron stove, and Jed poured himself a cup, savoring the bitter warmth. This small pleasure, one of the few he allowed himself, was interrupted by distant thunder rolling across the mesa. The storm was moving faster than he'd anticipated. Jed took his position on the porch, leather creaking as he settled into the weathered chair that gave him the best view of the approach. Most days, nothing came but dust and wind. Today felt different. His instincts, the ones that had kept him alive through war and law enforcement, hummed with warning. When he spotted the dust cloud rising beyond the ridge, those instincts screamed. Too many riders for casual travelers, too purposeful for lost ones. The federal marshal's badge concealed beneath the floorboards seemed to burn through the wood, a reminder of oaths he'd never truly abandoned despite his failures. Jed positioned himself with tactical precision as 7 figures emerged through the dust. Women, by their silhouettes, all in mourning black. His eyes narrowed. No widows rode like that, moved like that, watched like that. They approached in formation, not the random grouping of travelers seeking shelter. Their horses, too fine for ordinary widows, showed no signs of being pushed hard despite the impending storm. The lead rider scanned the property with the same methodical assessment Jed himself used. "Ma'am," he called when they reached speaking distance, his voice rough from disuse. "Storm's coming. Something I can help you with?" The woman at the front, striking with sharp features and calculating eyes, offered a practiced smile that never reached those eyes. "My sisters and I have been traveling since dawn. Storm caught us by surprise. Might we shelter in your barn until it passes?" 7 widows traveling alone? Jed kept his tone neutral, but his mind catalogued inconsistencies. The weapons hidden beneath shawls, the calluses on hands that had seen more than needlework, the way they'd positioned themselves to cover all angles of approach. Unusual times call for unusual arrangements, Mr. Her voice carried southern roots beneath frontier hardness. McGraw. Jedediah McGraw. He gestured toward the barn without taking his eyes off them. "Horses need tending." Lightning flashed, illuminating the woman's face, and, for just an instant, the metallic glint of a derringer partially concealed by her sleeve. The storm's first heavy drops began to fall as thunder cracked overhead. "Much obliged, Mr. McGraw." The woman nodded to her companions. "I'm Ruby May Hollister. We won't trouble you long." The wind picked up, driving them toward the house as another sound reached Jed's ears, distant hoofbeats approaching from the west. The cramped confines of Jed's cabin amplified the tension as the 7 women arranged themselves with suspicious efficiency. Ruby May stood near the fireplace, her companions spread throughout the room, covering exits, windows, and Jed himself, not the behavior of desperate travelers. "Coffee?" Jed asked, deliberately placing the pot on the table to reveal the Colt revolver hidden beneath it. The message was clear. He wasn't fooled. "Kind of you?" Ruby May's eyes tracked his movement. "You live alone out here, Mr. McGraw." "Prefer it that way." Jed poured 7 cups with deliberate calm. "Interesting that 7 widows would travel with Remington derringers under their shawls." The room went still. Ruby May's hand moved slightly toward her concealed weapon. "Interesting that a simple rancher stands like a cavalry officer and watches the room like a lawman." Jed allowed himself a thin smile. "We all have our secrets, ma'am. Some are more dangerous than others." Ruby May tilted her head, reassessing him. "My sisters and I find it safer to travel armed. The territories can be unwelcoming to women alone." Thunder shook the windows as rain lashed against the glass. Jed caught a glimpse of one of the younger women exchanging subtle hand signals with another, military signs he recognized from his time with the Union forces. "Those riders coming from the west," Jed said quietly. "They wouldn't happen to be looking for 7 women who aren't really widows, would they?" Ruby May's posture shifted, subtle but unmistakable. The pretense was falling away, replaced by the alertness of a predator. "And how would a rancher recognize military signals, Mr. McGraw?" Before he could answer, the distinct sound of approaching hoofbeats cut through the storm's fury. Jed moved to the window, careful to stay clear of potential sightlines. A dozen riders, heavily armed, approaching with purpose. "Those aren't ordinary travelers coming," he said, turning back to Ruby May. "That's Silas Boone's men, and you ladies are exactly who they're hunting." Ruby May's composure shifted instantly from deception to tactical assessment. "How do you know Boone's men?" "Let's just say our paths have crossed." Jed moved away from the window, mentally cataloging his ammunition and defensible positions. "You've got about 2 minutes to tell me why Silas Boone's hunting you and why I shouldn't just hand you over." The women exchanged glances before Ruby May nodded slightly. "We're not widows. We target men like Boone, men who traffic in children." "You're thieves," Jed said flatly. We're justice where the law fails. Ruby May's voice hardened with conviction. We've been tracking Boone's operation for months. 2 days ago, we hit his supply train carrying both money and ledgers, detailing his operation. A flash of lightning illuminated the room as thunder rattled the windows. The oldest of the women, gray-streaked hair framing a face marked by determination, stepped forward. "I'm Mei Lin Chen," she said, her accent hinting at Chinese origins despite her flawless English. "I was a doctor before Boone's men took my daughter. We don't expect you to risk yourself for strangers, Mr. McGraw." Jed studied them with new understanding. "You're about to have 12 riders who won't ask questions before shooting." "We've faced worse odds," Ruby May replied, already removing her widow's garb to reveal practical riding clothes beneath. The others followed suit, producing weapons from hidden pockets. "How do you know so much about Boone's methods?" Instead of answering, Jed moved to a loose floorboard near the fireplace and pried it up, retrieving several rifles and boxes of ammunition. The federal marshal's badge lay beneath them, untouched for years, but still carrying the weight of his oath. "My reasons are my own," he said, distributing the weapons. "But right now, we've got the same problem." Rain lashed against the cabin as Jed and the women transformed it into a fortress. Furniture became barricades, windows were secured with shutters designed for exactly this purpose, and each defender was positioned to cover a specific approach. "Pearl," Ruby May directed a tall woman with keen eyes to the rear window, "you're our best shot. Take the tall one first if they charge." Jed noted the precision of Ruby May's commands. Not her first time organizing a defense. "You've had military training." "My father was a colonel, Missouri 4th. She checked her revolver methodically. "Taught me more than needlepoint." Through the driving rain, Boone's men spread out around the property, seeking cover behind the barn and corral. A bolt of lightning revealed their leader, a heavy-set man with a distinctive eye patch, signaling to his men. "That's Camden," Jed said. "Boone's head enforcer, known for burning victims alive." Pearl's rifle cracked as the first rider made his move toward the house. The man tumbled from his saddle into the mud. "One less fire starter," she muttered, already sighting her next target. The storm provided unexpected cover, muffling sounds and limiting visibility. Mei Lin worked efficiently beside Jed, loading weapons as he fired with practiced precision. The youngest of the women, barely 20, maintained a steady barrage from her position by the kitchen window. "Hannah has Comanche blood," Ruby May explained, noting Jed's surprised glance at the girl's marksmanship. "Taught herself to shoot to avenge her mother." The cabin shuddered as a bullet splintered the doorframe. Jed and Ruby May instinctively covered each other's blind spots, moving with the unspoken coordination of experienced fighters. When the attackers attempted to flank the house, Jed anticipated the move. "South side," he called. Ruby May was already there, dropping 2 men with quick shots. A final rider, wounded and desperate, charged the front door only to be taken down by a perfectly timed shot from both Jed and Ruby May simultaneously. The wounded rider lay bound to a chair in the barn, his surly defiance belied by the fear in his eyes. Outside, the storm was passing, though rain still drummed steadily on the roof. Jed and Ruby May stood before him while Mei Lin treated his shoulder wound with brisk efficiency. "I ain't telling you nothing," the man spat. "Boone will do worse than kill me if I talk." "Boone's not here. We are," Jed said quietly, his tone more frightening for its calm. "And Dr. Chen here knows exactly which nerves cause the most pain with the least damage." Mei Lin's expression remained professionally neutral as she pressed slightly on the wound. The man gasped. Tell us about the Santa Fe connection, Ruby May demanded. The scout's eyes widened with surprise. How do you know about— We know more than you think, Jed interrupted, leaning closer. The governor's involvement. How deep does it go? The man's resistance crumbled under their precision questioning. All the way. Territorial judge, marshal's office in Santa Fe. They're all on his payroll. Ruby May produced a ledger from her saddlebag. This lists payments to officials we already suspected. What we need is the location of his main operation. The old trading post at Coyote Canyon, the scout said, desperation overtaking loyalty. But it won't matter. Once he knows you hit this outpost, he'll move everything. Jed and Ruby May exchanged glances of grim confirmation. The children being transported, Maylin asked, her professional demeanor cracking slightly. How many? 24, maybe more, heading east on the Santa Fe Trail tomorrow. The man's eyes darted between them. You can't stop it. Boone's got 50 men at the main compound. Jed's expression darkened at the mention of the children. We need to move, now. Camden escaped, Ruby May noted. He'll report straight to Boone. Then we've got a long ride ahead, Jed said, already calculating their next move. This ain't just about stolen money anymore. They've got connections that reach all the way to Santa Fe. Dawn broke clear after the storm, illuminating Jed's ranch house where a map of the territory lay spread across the table. 7 women and 1 former marshal gathered around it, faces etched with determination despite their exhaustion. Town's a 3-day ride if we take the main trail. Jed traced the route with his finger. But Camden will have men watching it. Ruby May shook her head. 3 days gives Boone time to move those children. We need information now. Rushing in got your last partner killed in El Paso, Jed countered. Ruby May's head snapped up. How did you— You're not the only one who's been tracking Boone. Jed's expression remained unreadable. Catherine Waters was a good woman, deserved better than a knife in the back. A heavy silence fell as the widows exchanged glances. Jed had just confirmed he knew far more about them than he'd admitted. If we split up, suggested Maylin, some of us could reach town faster through Devil's Pass. That pass lives up to its name, Jed warned. Flash floods, rock slides, and no patrols, Pearl added. I can guide a small group through, hunted those mountains for years. The strategic discussion revealed each woman's specialty. Pearl, the markswoman and tracker, Maylin, the doctor, with knowledge of both healing and poisons. Hannah, with her Comanche-taught survival skills. Sisters Eliza and Margaret Bennett, former actresses skilled in deception. And Sarah Winters, a quiet woman whose quick fingers could pick any lock or pocket. Ruby May tapped the map decisively. Jed and I will take Devil's Pass with Pearl. The rest of you follow the eastern route with the supplies. We'll rendezvous at Sarah Blackwood's saloon in Silver Creek. Jed raised an eyebrow. You know Sarah? We have mutual interests, Ruby May replied cryptically. Any objections to the plan? None came. The group dispersed to prepare, leaving Jed wondering just how deeply these women had been investigating Boone, and how much they might know about his own past. Devil's Pass earned its name through merciless terrain. Narrow switchbacks cutting between sheer rock faces, loose scree threatening to slide away beneath their horses' hooves, and the constant awareness that a single misstep meant death. By midday, Jed, Ruby May, and Pearl had navigated halfway through, pushing their mounts as fast as the treacherous path allowed. They rode in silence for hours, Pearl scouting ahead, while Jed and Ruby May maintained a careful distance between them, close enough for conversation, far enough that a single rock slide wouldn't take them both. "You recognized our formation when we arrived," Ruby May finally said, breaking the silence. "Military? Something like that." Jed guided his horse around a particularly narrow bend. "I was a schoolteacher before, in Texas." The admission came quietly, unexpectedly. Jed glanced over, reassessing the hard-eyed woman beside him. "What happened?" "Boone's men came through our town, took 3 children." Her voice remained steady, but her knuckles whitened on the reins. "My sister's boy among them." "And the law did nothing." "The law was paid to look away." Bitterness edged her words. "So 7 women who'd lost everything decided to become what the law wouldn't." They reached a small plateau where Pearl waited, offering their horses a moment's rest. The vista spread before them, miles of territory where Boone's influence reached like poison through water. "You were a marshal," Ruby May said. Not a question. Jed didn't deny it. 8 years ago, I was protecting a witness family against Boone. I failed." "Phillips," Ruby May said softly. "Your partner. We found records of the case." The shared knowledge hung between them. Not quite trust, but understanding. Both had lost people to Boone. Both sought justice the system had failed to provide. Pearl suddenly tensed, pointing to distant dust on the trail below. Riders, moving fast toward Silver Creek. Silver Creek greeted them with the typical sounds of a frontier town, hammering from the blacksmith, drunken laughter spilling from the saloon, the creak of wagons passing through the muddy main street. Jed, Ruby May, and Pearl entered separately, careful not to draw attention as they assessed the town. The Silver Spur Saloon stood at the far end of the street, its weathered facade hiding its importance as the town's true information hub. Sarah Blackwood had owned it for 15 years, outlasting 3 husbands and countless threats. She knew everything worth knowing in Silver Creek. Jed entered first, pulling his hat low. The afternoon crowd barely glanced up from their cards and whiskey, but Sarah Blackwood spotted him immediately from behind the bar. Her eyebrows rose slightly, the only indication of surprise she allowed herself. "Jedediah McGraw," she said when he approached. "Thought you'd died or left the territory." "Just keeping to myself, Sarah." He accepted the whiskey she poured without asking. "These ladies with you?" Sarah's eyes flicked to Ruby May and Pearl, who had entered separately and positioned themselves strategically around the room. "Just travelers needing supplies." Jed lowered his voice. "Know anything about Silas Boone's recent activities?" Sarah's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Not here," she murmured, glancing toward a young woman serving drinks across the room. "Meet me behind the saloon at dusk." The young woman, Sarah's daughter Josephine, watched their exchange with keen interest before turning away to serve a table of minors. Something in her movements caught Jed's attention, a calculated awareness that seemed at odds with her role as a simple barmaid. As Jed turned to leave, he caught Ruby May's eye across the room and gave a subtle nod toward Josephine. Ruby May's slight frown confirmed his suspicion. Something about the young woman warranted caution. Outside, he noticed 2 men watching the saloon from across the street, their attention too focused to be casual observation. Judge Emmett Caldwell's chambers occupied a small room behind the assayer's office, a discreet location befitting a man whose life depended on careful appearances. The silver-haired jurist locked the door behind Jed before speaking. 8 years is a long time to play dead, Marshal McGraw." Caldwell gestured to a chair before retrieving a bottle of bourbon from a hidden compartment in his bookshelf. "I'm not a marshal anymore." Jed remained standing. According to Washington, you never stopped being one. Caldwell placed a sealed envelope on his desk. Your handler has maintained your status as deep cover all these years. Quite unusual, but then again, Silas Boone is an unusual target. Jed stared at the envelope, surprise breaking through his careful composure. Director Haynes kept my commission active? He believed you'd surface when the time was right. Caldwell poured 2 glasses. I'd say harboring 7 vigilante widows qualifies. They're not really widows. No, but they've done more damage to Boone's operation in 6 months than the law has in years. Caldwell pushed a glass toward Jed. The territorial governor is involved, Jed, along with Judge Harmon in Santa Fe and at least 2 other marshals. Jed finally took the offered seat. How deep does it go? Caldwell unlocked a hidden safe behind a painting and retrieved a stack of documents. These are copies of land deeds, transportation manifests, and bank records. Boone's using official channels to move children through the territory under the guise of orphan relocation programs. As Jed examined the papers, a name caught his eye: Camden Phillips. His body went rigid. Phillips, he whispered. Any relation to your former partner's brother? Caldwell's voice was grave. It seems Deputy Marshal Daniel Phillips's death wasn't just about silencing a witness. It was family business. Jed's hand tightened on the document, the final piece of an 8-year puzzle falling into place. His partner hadn't died because of Jed's tactical error. He'd been betrayed from within his own family. The narrow canyon that served as the eastern approach to Silver Creek should have offered a safe route for their rendezvous with the other widows. Instead, as Jed, Ruby May, and Pearl rode through the deepening shadows of late afternoon, the silence struck Jed as unnatural. No birds, no small animals scurrying away from their approach. Something's wrong, he murmured, signaling a halt. Ruby May nodded, already scanning the ridge above them. They shouldn't have known we'd take this path. The first shot shattered the stillness, sending rock fragments spraying as the bullet struck inches from Pearl's head. In one fluid motion, Jed dismounted, pulling his rifle free as he rolled behind a boulder. "Ambush!" he shouted. "Get to cover!" Ruby May was already moving, guiding her horse to shield Pearl as they scrambled behind a rock outcropping. Shots rained down from both sides of the canyon. "I count 8. No, 10, Pearl called, her rifle already answering the attackers' fire with methodical precision. Jed assessed their position with the tactical clarity that had once made him the territory's most effective marshal. "They've got us pinned. Someone knew exactly when and where we'd be." Ruby May's expression darkened. Someone talked. A bullet whined past Jed's ear as he returned fire, dropping one of the ambushers from his perch. The man tumbled down the rocky slope, landing in a broken heap on the canyon floor. As the gunfight intensified, Jed caught a glimpse of a man directing the ambush from a protected position, a tall figure with a distinctive scar running down his face. Recognition hit Jed like a physical blow. The one with the scar. He was there when Phillips died, he called to Ruby May, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. Camden's brother, she confirmed grimly. Working with unspoken coordination, they began methodically creating an escape route, picking off attackers with precision while moving toward a narrow side passage. It wasn't just coincidence. Boone's men were waiting exactly where we'd be, Jed said as they reached temporary safety. Someone sold us out, and this just got personal. The abandoned mineshaft offered little comfort, but considerable safety. Lantern light cast long shadows across rough-hewn walls as Jed, Ruby May and the reunited group of widows gathered around a crude map sketched in the dirt floor. Outside, night had fallen completely, cloaking their hideout from searching eyes. "Direct assault is suicide," Jed stated flatly, pointing to the trading post layout he'd drawn. "They outnumber us 3-1, and after today's ambush, they'll be expecting something. Which is why we use deception, not force," Ruby May countered. "My women pose as new merchandise." "Absolutely not," Jed cut her off. "Too dangerous. It's worked before. 3 times. Ruby May's tone was matter-of-fact. "And the 4th time got Catherine killed in Tucson." Ruby May's expression flickered with surprise. "You've been tracking us that long?" Instead of answering, Jed modified the plan. "We use the deception approach, but with adjustments. Maylin, Eliza, and Margaret pose as merchandise. Pearl and I take sniper positions here and here." He indicated ridge points overlooking the compound. "Ruby May, Hannah, and Sarah infiltrate as new staff members. Boone's been recruiting since we disrupted his operation." Pearl cleaned her rifle methodically as she spoke. "The children are the priority. Whatever evidence we find is secondary." "Agreed," Jed nodded. "Judge Caldwell has provided legal documents authorizing me to seize evidence as a federal marshal. Anything we find will be admissible in court." Josephine Blackwood, who had joined them after convincing her mother to help, leaned forward with interest. "What about the governor's men? They'll be watching the roads." Jed glanced at her, still uncertain about her sudden appearance and convenient assistance. "We don't use roads. We go overland and hit them at dawn when the guard changes." As the group dispersed to prepare, Jed caught Ruby May watching Josephine with the same wariness he felt. Neither spoke their suspicions aloud, but their shared glance confirmed mutual caution. Dawn was 6 hours away. Whatever betrayal had led to the ambush, they couldn't afford another. The trading post that served as Boone's regional headquarters looked deceptively ordinary in the pale light of early morning. Freight wagons stood in the yard, legitimate commerce providing cover for the operation within. Guards patrolled with the casual confidence of men who believed their security unbreachable. Ruby May approached the main gate with Hannah and Sarah beside her, all 3 dressed as frontier women seeking work. Behind them, a wagon driven by Pearl contained what appeared to be 3 subdued women, actually Maylin, Eliza, and Margaret, playing their roles with practiced precision. "Help you ladies?" The guard at the gate didn't bother hiding his leer. "Mr. Camden said you need kitchen help." Ruby May affected a desperate tone, shoulders slumped in submission. "Said there might be work for my sisters, too." "Camden didn't mention new girls arriving today." The guard's suspicion was evident. Ruby May lowered her voice. "Mr. Carver in Santa Fe said we're special order for the territorial judge's private collection." The guard hesitated. "I should check. Check if you want." Ruby May allowed a hint of fear to enter her voice. "But Mr. Carver said the judge doesn't like to wait. Neither does Mr. Boone." The name-dropping worked. The guard signaled to open the gate, allowing the wagon to enter before conducting a cursory search of the women for weapons. From his hidden position on the ridge, Jed watched through a spyglass, tracking their progress and counting guards. Inside, Ruby May took careful note of the compound's layout. Children were being held in a converted storeroom. She counted at least 15 through a partially open door. Armed men patrolled regular routes that suggested military training. As they were separated for processing, Ruby May caught Maylin's eye and gave a subtle hand signal. Maylin created a momentary distraction by feigning illness, allowing Sarah to slip away and unlock a side entrance where Jed would enter once darkness fell. Everything was proceeding according to plan, until Ruby May glimpsed Camden Phillips watching her with particular interest from an upstairs window. Moonlight cast sharp shadows across the trading post compound as Jed moved silently between buildings. Earlier, Pearl's rifle had eliminated 2 perimeter guards with such precision that their absence remained undiscovered. Inside, Ruby May and the others had positioned themselves according to plan, ready to move when Jed gave the signal. The children were being prepared for transport at dawn. Jed could hear their frightened whispers as he approached the storeroom. 2 guards stood watch, but a sudden commotion from the main building drew one away. Jed dispatched the remaining guard with a swift, silent strike. "We're getting you out," he whispered to the wide-eyed children as he unlocked the door. Hannah appeared from the shadows to guide them toward the escape route they'd prepared. 2 minutes until the charges blow the south wall, Jed told her as the children filed out. The diversionary explosion would cover their escape while Ruby May secured the ledgers from Boone's office. A familiar voice from behind froze him in place. "Or I could just alert the guards now." Jed turned slowly to find Josephine Blackwood emerging from the shadows, a revolver trained on him. "Josephine?" Hannah's voice betrayed her shock. "What are you doing?" "Making sure I'm on the winning side." Josephine's smile never reached her eyes. "And did you know your friend here is a federal marshal?" Ruby May appeared in the doorway, ledgers in hand, her expression hardening at the scene before her. "You betrayed us at the canyon." "Business is business," Josephine shrugged. "Boone pays better than my mother's moral crusades." Jed's hand moved to his vest, producing his long-hidden badge. "Federal Marshal Jedediah McGraw, put down the weapon." The distraction was enough. Hannah launched herself at Josephine as the first explosion rocked the compound. In the chaos, the revolver discharged, the bullet grazing Jed's arm as Ruby May secured Josephine. Alarm bells rang throughout the compound as their cover dissolved. "Move!" Jed ordered, the children's safety now the only priority. As they fled through the confusion of smoke and shouting, Ruby May's accusatory glance spoke volumes. He'd kept his true identity hidden from her, just as she'd suspected from the beginning. Trust, already fragile, had shattered completely. The abandoned church stood 5 miles from Boone's compound, its crumbling walls offering temporary sanctuary. Inside, children huddled under blankets, their exhausted bodies finally succumbing to sleep after the terror of their escape. Outside, the night sky had begun to lighten with the first hints of dawn. Ruby May cornered Jed in the vestibule, her voice low but sharp with contained fury. "You've been investigating us all along, using us." Jed leaned against the wall, wincing slightly as Mei Lin finished bandaging his arm before discreetly leaving them alone. "I've been tracking Boone for 8 years, he replied evenly. "You're the ones who interfered in a federal investigation. While you built your case, how many children disappeared?" Ruby May's eyes flashed. "How many families destroyed? 8 years, Marshal, and what do you have to show for it?" "And how many laws have you broken?" Jed countered, his own frustration rising. "How is your justice any different from vigilante revenge? The difference is, we actually save people instead of just building cases." She stepped closer, her voice dangerously quiet. "We've rescued 37 children in 6 months. What did your badge accomplish in 8 years? The accusation struck deeper than she knew. Jed's jaw tightened. "You think I don't know the cost of playing by the rules? I've carried the weight of Philip's death and that family's lives every day. But without the law, we're no better than Boone." "Your precious law is corrupted to the core," Ruby May hissed. The governor, judges, even your fellow marshals, all bought and paid for. Their confrontation didn't go unnoticed. Across the church, the other women watched with growing concern. Pearl moved protectively toward Ruby May, while Mei Lin's expression suggested more sympathy toward Jed's position. "You should have told us who you were from the beginning," Ruby May said finally. "How can we trust anything you say now?" "Trust?" Jed's laugh held no humor. "You arrived at my door in disguise, armed and lying about who you were. Trust works both ways, Mrs. Hollister." The use of her real name, further proof of how much he knew about them, only deepened the fracture between them. Midnight found Jed alone in the church bell tower, the cool air a relief after hours of tension below. The marshal's badge lay heavy in his palm, its silver surface catching moonlight that streamed through the broken roof. 8 years of carrying it in secret, and now it felt like both an accusation and a reminder of promises unkept. Footsteps on the ladder announced he wasn't alone. Mei Lin appeared, medical bag in hand. "Your bandage needs changing," she said simply, approaching without waiting for permission. Jed submitted to her ministrations in silence, staring out at the distant mountains while she worked. "You weren't always alone, were you?" Mei Lin finally asked, her gentle voice at odds with her efficient hands. "Had a partner once. Phillips." The name came reluctantly. "And a witness family we were protecting." "What happened?" Jed's gaze remained fixed on the horizon. "I insisted we split up, cover more ground. I was wrong. By the time I got there, Phillips and the whole family, even the children, were dead. And you believe it was your fault." "It wasn't a question." "I know it was." Jed finally looked at her. "And now I know Boone's men were responsible, led by Phillips's own brother. The ultimate betrayal." Mei Lin finished securing the fresh bandage before speaking again. "I was chief surgeon at San Francisco City Hospital before coming to the territories. I lost 17 patients in one yellow fever outbreak. I blamed my skills, my decisions." She closed her medical bag. "It took me years to understand that blame and responsibility aren't always the same thing." "Difference is, your patients had a chance," Jed replied. "I failed before the fight even started. Yet here you are, still fighting." Mei Lin moved toward the ladder. "Ruby May lost her sister and nephew to Boone. She blames herself too. Perhaps you have more in common than either of you want to admit." As she descended, Jed remained with his thoughts, the badge still cold in his hand as dawn slowly lightened the eastern sky. Morning sunlight streamed through stained glass, casting colored patterns across the church's worn floorboards. Jed found Ruby May alone in the main chapel, studying a map spread before her on the altar. The children had been moved to Sarah Blackwood's protection, leaving the group momentarily free to plan their next move. Ruby May didn't look up as he approached. "If you've come to arrest us, I suggest you bring more men." "Not why I'm here." Jed placed his badge on the altar beside her map. "My real name is Jedediah McGraw, federal marshal for 8 years, undercover for the last 3. She finally met his gaze, her expression guarded but attentive. "My real name is Rebecca Hollister," she replied after a moment. "My sister and her husband were murdered by Boone's men, their son taken. I've never found him. That's why you formed this group. 7 women who lost everything to men like Boone." Something in her voice softened. "The law couldn't help us, so we help ourselves." Jed studied the map, noting the markings that indicated Boone's known operations. "Judge Caldwell can provide legal protection for the children we rescued. I can ensure the evidence gets to Washington, where the territorial governor can't bury it. And Boone? We take him down. Together. Jed looked directly at her. Your methods with my authority. Ruby May considered him for a long moment. How do I know I can trust you now? You don't. But we want the same thing. Boone's operation dismantled and those children safe. He gestured to the badge between them. And that means something to me, even after everything. Before she could respond, Pearl burst into the church, breathing hard from running. Riders coming from town, she reported urgently. Sarah Blackwood sent warning. Boone's men found your ranch, burned it to the ground. They're searching every homestead within 20 miles. Ruby May's eyes met Jed's, the immediate threat superseding their differences. We've got nothing left but the truth between us, she said, handing him back his badge. Now let's use it to finish what we started. Judge Caldwell's root cellar was never intended to host war councils, yet here they were, a federal marshal, 7 vigilante widows, a frontier judge, and Sarah Blackwood, the saloon keeper with connections throughout the territory. Oil lamps cast flickering shadows across their determined faces as they gathered around a makeshift table. What you're proposing skirts the edge of legal procedure, Marshal. Judge Caldwell examined the documents spread before him. Maps of Boone's main compound, lists of corrupted officials, and evidence of the trafficking operation. We've tried procedure for years, Jed replied. Children are still disappearing. Sarah Blackwood's weathered face reflected decades of frontier hardship. Half the town knows what Boone does. They're just too scared to act. They won't have to, Ruby May said, her eyes meeting Jed's with newfound respect. We'll be their justice. Judge Caldwell sighed heavily, the weight of his position evident in the slump of his shoulders. I can provide federal warrants and ensure what you find is admissible. Beyond that, we'll do what needs doing, Jed finished. The plan took shape as each person contributed their knowledge. Pearl's tracking skills would guide them through the unmapped approach to Boone's headquarters. Mei Lin prepared non-lethal compounds that would incapacitate guards without endangering nearby children. The Bennett sisters' theatrical talents would create crucial diversions. Boone's expecting us to hit his operation, Ruby May pointed out. But he's not expecting this. She tapped the map where Caldwell had marked an upcoming gathering of territorial officials at Boone's estate. The governor, Judge Harmon, and 2 corrupt marshals, all in one place. Jed nodded, understanding her thinking. We take them all down together. I have men I trust, Caldwell added. Deputies from 3 counties who've lost family to Boone. They'll back your play when the time comes. Sarah Blackwood produced a folded paper from her pocket. And I have a list of every family in Silver Creek willing to testify once Boone's protection is gone. For the first time in 8 years, Jed felt something he'd almost forgotten, hope. Dawn painted the eastern sky as preparations unfolded across Silver Creek. In the livery stable, Jed methodically checked weapons, while Pearl adjusted sights on her prized Sharps rifle. You'll have 1 shot at the guard tower, he reminded her. Pearl chambered a round with practiced ease. 1 shot is all I've ever needed. Across town, Ruby May and Mei Lin inventoried medical supplies in the doctor's abandoned office they'd commandeered. If this works, what will you do after? Ruby May asked, pausing in her count of bandages. Mei Lin's hands stilled momentarily. Open a proper doctor's office. Somewhere children are safe. She glanced at Ruby May. And if it doesn't work, then we'll have tried something that mattered. At the church, the Bennett sisters transformed Sarah and Hannah with theatrical makeup and carefully selected clothing. No longer vigilante widows, they became respectable frontier ladies who might plausibly attend a territorial gathering. Judge Caldwell worked in his chambers, preparing official documents and arrest warrants. His hand trembled slightly as he affixed the federal seal. One misstep, and his career, perhaps his life, would be forfeit. Behind the saloon, 3 trusted deputies received their instructions from Jed, their expressions solemn as they understood the magnitude of what they were undertaking. As dusk approached, Jed found Ruby May alone on the church steps, staring at the setting sun. "Having second thoughts?" he asked quietly. "No." She didn't look away from the horizon. "Just wondering if my sister's boy is still alive, if he'd even recognize me after all this time." Jed sat beside her, the small distance between them no longer charged with suspicion. "What's his name?" "Samuel. He'd be 11 now." Her voice held steady, but her hands betrayed her emotion. "We'll find him," Jed promised, "whatever it takes." They sat in companionable silence as darkness fell, the unspoken weight of tomorrow's mission settling around them. Night had fully claimed Silver Creek when a lone figure approached the church where final preparations were underway. Jed spotted her first. Josephine Blackwood, walking slowly with her hands raised in clear view, her face a mask of apprehension. "Stop right there," he called, leveling his revolver. Ruby May emerged from the shadows, her own weapon trained on Josephine. "You have nerve coming here after your betrayal." "I deserve that," Josephine admitted, keeping her hands visible. "But you need to hear what I know. Why should we believe you after your betrayal?" Ruby May's voice was cold as winter steel. "Because my mother taught me better than I've acted," Josephine replied, her composure cracking slightly. "And because Boone plans to silence everyone who knows his operation once he's gone." Jed studied her carefully. "Including you." "Including me," Josephine nodded. "I'll accept whatever justice comes after. But right now, you need my help." After a tense moment, Jed holstered his weapon and nodded for Ruby May to do the same. They escorted Josephine inside, where the others waited, tension thick in the air. "They're moving everything tonight," Josephine explained, spreading a detailed map of Boone's compound that showed guard positions and access points. "By dawn, Boone will be gone with all evidence of the operation. The gathering is happening earlier than planned. Midnight, not tomorrow." Pearl examined the map with a tracker's eye. "These guard positions are precise. Too good for someone who just decided to switch sides." "I've been having doubts for weeks," Josephine admitted. "I've been memorizing details, just in case." Sarah Blackwood burst through the door before anyone could respond. "Riders just came through town. Boone's men. They're setting up roadblocks on every approach to his compound." Jed and Ruby May exchanged glances of understanding. Their carefully constructed plan had just collapsed. "It's now or never," Jed said grimly. "Everything we've fought for comes down to the next few hours." The gathering at Boone's compound resembled any territorial social function. Lanterns illuminating the courtyard, well-dressed officials arriving in carriages, servants moving efficiently among guests. Only the doubled guard presence hinted at something beyond a simple political meeting. Ruby May approached the main gate with Eliza and Margaret Bennett beside her, all 3 transformed into frontier society women through careful costume and demeanor. Josephine accompanied them, her presence their supposed invitation to the exclusive event. "These aren't on the manifest for tonight," the guard captain said, eyeing the women suspiciously. "Special delivery from my mother's establishment," Josephine smiled with practiced charm, "for the territorial governor's private entertainment. From inside, a portly man in an expensive suit called out, "Let them through, Captain. Sarah Blackwood's girls are always welcome." The women were admitted with minimal scrutiny, their carefully concealed weapons undetected beneath elaborate gowns. As they dispersed through the gathering, Ruby May took careful note of the attendees. The territorial governor conversing with Judge Harmon near the refreshments, two marshals she recognized from wanted posters in Caldwell's office, and several businessmen with investments in Boone's enterprises. May Lynn and Hannah, disguised as serving women, circulated with trays of drinks, some doctored with May Lynn's sleeping compounds for specific targets. Sarah, playing a wealthy widow, engaged a group of officials in conversation, drawing attention away from the compound's perimeter where Jed and Pearl were positioning themselves. Ruby May caught sight of movement on the balcony overlooking the courtyard. Silas Boone himself, surveying his gathering with the satisfaction of a man who believed himself untouchable. She signaled discreetly to Jed's position outside the wall. The first phase was complete. Now came the dangerous part. The study where Silas Boone conducted his business was a monument to ill-gotten wealth, leather-bound books he'd never read, expensive liquor in crystal decanters, and mounted animal heads that stared with glass eyes at the corruption below. He stood at the window, watching his gathering with the satisfied air of a man at the peak of his power. He didn't turn when Ruby May entered, closing the door silently behind her. "I wondered when you'd make your way up here," he said, still gazing out the window. "The famous Ruby May Hollister. I've heard much about you and your widows. You know why I'm here." Ruby May's voice was steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. Now Boone turned, studying her with cold calculation. "Revenge, I assume, though for which family member I couldn't say. I've taken so many." His casual cruelty was more chilling than any rage. "Rebecca Hollister," she corrected him. "My sister was Mary Hollister. Her son was Samuel." Recognition flickered in Boone's eyes, followed by something like amusement. "Ah, yes, the schoolteacher's family. 1874, wasn't it? The boy brought a good price." Ruby May's hand tightened on the derringer concealed in her sleeve, but she maintained her composure. "Where is he?" "Dead, most likely." Boone shrugged. "They don't tend to last long in the mines." Outside, the first signals of the operation beginning reached them. A guard tower lamp extinguished, Pearl's work eliminating the watchman without a sound. Boone didn't notice, his attention fixed on Ruby May. "You've caused me considerable inconvenience," he continued, moving toward his desk, where Ruby May knew a gun was kept. "But tonight ends your little crusade. My men are already rounding up your accomplices." "I don't think so." The voice came from the balcony door as Jed stepped into the room, marshal's badge gleaming on his chest, revolver trained on Boone. "Federal Marshal Jedediah McGraw. Silas Boone, you're under arrest for kidnapping, trafficking, and the murder of Deputy Marshal Daniel Phillips." Boone's expression hardened as he recognized Jed. "McGraw, I thought Camden had dealt with you years ago." "He failed, just like you failed to see justice coming for you." Jed advanced into the room. "It's over, Boone." With surprising speed, Boone lunged for his desk drawer. Ruby May's derringer barked once, the bullet striking his shoulder as Jed closed the distance between them. Boone's hand emerged with a revolver, but Jed was faster, knocking the weapon aside and driving the man to the floor. "For Phillips," Jed said through gritted teeth, his revolver pressed to Boone's temple. For a heartbeat, Ruby May saw the rage in his eyes, the temptation to end it with a single shot. "Jed," she said softly, "not like this. He faces justice in court." After a moment of terrible tension, Jed nodded once and pulled back, securing Boone's hands with manacles. "Silas Boone, you're under arrest. You have the right to face your accusers in a court of law, which is more than you gave any of your victims." Morning sunlight streamed through Judge Caldwell's office windows as he affixed the final seal to the documents before him. 3 days had passed since Boone's arrest. 3 days of testimonies, evidence cataloging, and telegraph wires burning with messages to Washington. "The territorial governor is already in federal custody," Caldwell informed Jed and Ruby May. "Judge Harmon and the 2 marshals as well. Boone's entire operation is being dismantled from Santa Fe to St. Louis." "And the children?" Ruby May asked, the question that had driven her for years. 17 rescued from his properties so far," Caldwell replied. "Records recovered from his office have identified another 30 who were sold to mining operations and plantations. Federal agents are tracking them now." "Samuel?" Her voice remained steady, but Jed noticed her hands clasped tightly together. Caldwell's expression softened. "A boy matching his description was sent to a silver mine in Colorado Territory. Agents are on their way there now." The possibility, just the possibility, that her nephew might still be alive lit something in Ruby May's eyes that Jed hadn't seen before. Hope. "What happens to us?" Pearl asked, speaking for all the widows. "Officially," Caldwell shuffled through his papers, "Rebecca Hollister, Mei Lin Chen, and the others died tragically in a cabin fire while traveling through the territory. Their remains were unidentifiable." "And unofficially?" Jed pressed. 7 women with useful skills might find opportunities with the Pinkerton Detective Agency," Caldwell suggested. "They're always looking for operatives who can go where men cannot." Later, as they stood on the boardwalk outside, Ruby May turned to Jed. "What about you? Your cover's blown. You can't go back to being a reclusive rancher." "No," Jed agreed, looking at the marshal's badge in his hand. "Director Haynes has offered me a position training new marshals. Says my experience might keep some young fools alive." "Will you take it?" Jed considered the badge for a long moment, then placed it on the railing between them. "I've worn this for 8 years, most of them in secret. Maybe it's time to find out who Jedediah McGraw is without it." The question hung unspoken between them, a possibility neither had considered until now. "Colorado's a long way," Jed said finally. "Person could use a traveling companion, someone who knows how to handle trouble on the trail." Ruby May's smile, her real smile, perhaps her first in years, was answer enough. "The badge was never what made me who I am," Jed said, leaving it behind as they walked toward the livery stable together. "Maybe it's time to find out who I am without it. Well, partner, we've come to the end of our trail with Jedediah McGraw and Ruby May Hollister. If you're feeling a touch of dust in your eyes after riding alongside these 2 broken souls as they found their way back to something like redemption, I understand completely. Their journey through the New Mexico Territory of 1878 has left me changed in ways I'm still discovering, and I suspect their story might have stirred something in you, too. There's something about the frontier that strips away pretense and reveals who we truly are when facing impossible choices." Jed spent 8 years isolated on that ranch, convinced his failure to save his partner and that Witness family had defined him forever. But redemption isn't about erasing our failures. It's about finding the courage to act differently when the next test comes. And it always comes, doesn't it? That moment when we must choose between what's safe and what's right, between protecting ourselves and standing for others. What struck me most while writing this story was how deeply isolation had wounded both Jed and Ruby May, and how connection ultimately saved them. We aren't meant to carry our burdens alone, especially the weight of past mistakes. Those 7 women with their vigilante justice, Judge Caldwell with his quiet integrity, even young Josephine seeking redemption. They didn't just need Jed's protection, they gave him something to believe in again. Sometimes the people we're trying to save end up saving us instead. The tension between law and justice that Jed and Ruby May navigated isn't just a frontier dilemma. We may not face corrupt territorial governors or trafficking operations, but we all encounter moments that test our character. The institution that demands we compromise our principles, the friend who needs us to speak uncomfortable truths, the stranger who deserves our help even when helping costs us something precious. The New Mexico Territory of 1878 may be long gone, but the choice between courage and comfort remains as relevant as tomorrow's sunrise. In the end, both Jed and Ruby May learned what the frontier has always taught those brave enough to listen. We're not defined by our worst moments, but by what we do after them. Second chances aren't given. They're earned, one difficult choice at a time. Thank you for riding this trail with me, friend. Your willingness to follow these flawed characters from suspicion to trust, from isolation to connection, is what transforms mere words into something that matters. Jed and Ruby May's story has me reflecting on those moments that define us, those crossroads where we choose between what's easy and what's right. We all carry regrets, and we all face times when doing the honorable thing costs more than we think we can afford. What impossible choice have you faced that forced you to decide between safety and doing what's right? Share your story in the comments below, because courage deserves to be honored, whether it happened on the frontier or in your daily life. If this journey of redemption through unlikely alliance stirred something in your spirit, I'd be grateful if you'd hit that like button and consider subscribing. The West is full of stories about people finding their way back to themselves through the most unexpected companions, and I'd be honored to share more of them with you. Until next time, may your moral compass stay true, even when the path ahead is shrouded in storm clouds.